Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Wow, good. Bit of a lively crowd. It's great to have you all here. It's great to be here in Atlanta. Thank you all for coming. This is actually our 5th annual user conference. Can I get a show of hands of who's been to all 5? My friend Dada. Excellent. Well done, my friend. Congratulations. But it's great to see so many familiar faces. Can I also get a show of hands of who was in Portland last year? Great. Okay, a few more that were at Portland last year. For me, this is a better experience so far already than Portland. The event we had in Portland the weekend before, I was in Bogota, Colombia at a wedding and got food poisoning. I then flew into the conference in Portland where I found that there was fires surrounding the city and the city was covered in smoke. And then I flew out that next morning to go to Miami and get my family out of Miami before the hurricane hit. So far this has been a much better experience for me. Hopefully it has been for you as well. We have a great lineup of speakers. I think it's the best lineup of speakers we've had so far in the 5 years we've been hosting the conference. A lot of customers and users that are sharing their successes and their innovations with what they're doing with the technology. So I think you're going to get a great learning over the next couple of days. It's also, by the way, the first time we've hosted the conference on the East Coast, which I think is a great change. So I'm glad we've got such solid attendance here. I want to thank the sponsors. Many of the sponsors, hopefully you've seen. If you haven't already, they're in the Partner Expo. A big thank you to Red Hat, who's sponsored again for the 2nd year as our Platinum sponsor. They're a great partner of ours. We do a lot of work with Red Hat, load balancing on top of their RHEL Linux platform, our Ingress router for OpenShift, and also we do a lot of work with the team at Ansible for automating NGINX using Ansible. So please go and see the sponsors in the Partner Expo as well, and thank you for all their support. When I do the keynote each year, I try and take the opportunity to reflect on what's happened in the last 12 months. I try and look at what's happened in the world, in society, in our industry, in technology, and try and get a sense of what's happened and piece that together and share it with you. And so this year is no exception. What I've really come to take away over that sort of research that I've been doing is that whether we like it or not, we really now live in a digital world. And I bet everyone in this room is saying, Gus, that's no amazing surprise or epiphany. What do you mean by that? I'm glad you asked. You want proof that now we live in a digital world? Number one, we now have over 4 billion people connected to the internet. So that's over half of the world's global population are now connected to the internet. Of those 4 billion people, on average, they spend 6 hours connected. 6 hours a day. Let me put that in context for you. That's 1/3 of their waking hours, assuming that you sleep 6 hours a night. Most people, I'm assuming, sleep more than that. So more than 1/3 of your waking hours are connected to the internet. If you do the math on what that looks like for 2018, we're going to spend 1 billion years online in 2018 as a society. That's just an incredible number. To me, those numbers are staggering. Let's look at some more data to support this. There's now over $1.5 trillion spent online shopping by consumers. If you add to that the non-consumer spending online, business spending, we're now at over $2 trillion. So a significant amount of spending is happening online. Over 16% of all spending is happening through online and digital means. I think an incredible data point is that we're now using 3 gigabytes per month of download speed on our mobile phones. 3 gigabytes per month. That means we're using incredible, rich content. Think of videos, music, data, applications that we're using on our phones, probably mostly also as a hotspot so that we can connect anywhere we want to be. But if you look at just that data, look at the growth compared to last year. We're looking at 50% increase in data usage on a mobile phone. Imagine the strain that puts for the telcos on 4G, LTE networks, 5G, what have you, right? As this growth continues, what's that going to look like a year from now, or even 2 or 3 years from now? And how do we get prepared for the amount of downloading that's going to happen over the wireless networks? So that shows you some of the data points to prove that we live in a digital world. What I think is even more interesting is what the impact of that is on us as a society and as a species. If you look at expectations that have changed as a result of now the digital access that we have, it's quite staggering. One study that Ericsson hosted looked at what is the impact now of buffering of just a few seconds in a video in terms of the psyche of the human. So what impact does that have on your consciousness? And what they found is just a simple buffering of a video happening a few times over the period was the equal anxiety level of watching a horror movie on your own. This is a fact. I'm not making this up. I'll happily share the report with you. That is quite incredible. Expectations are changing as a result of this digital experience that we're getting now. Let me share with you a personal example for me. My mortgage suddenly went up a couple of months ago, and I wasn't quite sure why, so I wanted to reach out to my mortgage company to find out why. There was no means for me to communicate with them online, so I had to call them. First, I had to enter in my account number and then my secret phone PIN. Then I had to go through a sequence of phone menus, press 1 for this, 2 for that, 3 for this. Once I press 3, go to the next menu, press 1 for this, 2 for this, 3 for that. Eventually, about 5 minutes later, I talked to a human being. That person then tells me, oh, I'm sorry, none of your details transferred over to me. Can you give me your account number again? And because you weren't able to authorize using the PIN, I need to know your mother's maiden name. Where were you born? What was the name of your pet frog growing up? Right? And they said, oh, okay, well, now that we've got your details, what's happened is that your condo hasn't sent us the flood insurance, so we need them to send us the flood insurance so that we don't have to take out insurance for you. I said, okay, great. Where do I email that to you? They said, oh, sir, we don't accept emails. You have to fax it. Can I have a show of hands? Who still here owns a fax? Okay, that's exactly what I thought. This is the type of experience that we're getting with some providers, and our level of expectation has changed to the point that, to me, that was a completely unacceptable experience. And if I could have, in the moment, changed my mortgage provider, I would have, right? Now, changing your mortgage provider is a little harder than other things. But if you think about it, I want to buy a pair of shoes and have them delivered to me within a day. I want to buy a book online and have it in my Kindle in 10 seconds. You know, I want to be able to get an email that tells me my insurance is due and click a button in the email and automatically have my insurance renewed. I want to be able to go online and order flowers for my mother's birthday in Australia and know that they're going to be delivered that same afternoon to my mother in Australia on the other side of the planet. Those are the expectations that we have now. So much so that if we have the right experience with a vendor, we're willing to spend up to 15% more purchasing products with that vendor than anybody else, because we'd rather that level of convenience than going and signing up to a new vendor, putting in our account details, credit card details, trying to work out whether I'm comfortable with their refund policies and so on. I'd just rather stick with the vendor I know and trust. So I'm actually willing to spend up to 15% more for that level of convenience. This has now become an addiction. People have even described it, it's like an addiction. That 2-day shipping, one-click buying, it's now giving humans a sense of control that they've never had before. And so much so that psychologists have said that the human brain is evolving and creating new synapses, that this is the sort of control that we now expect to have on a continual basis. And because our synapses in our brain is changing and our expectations have changed, that's now what we think is commonplace, that when we don't get that, our level of anxiety and frustration when we don't get it just goes up an inordinate amount. This is now the world we live in, a level of convenience that we've come to expect. And guess what? I thought it was just the millennials, but it's not. I'm the same way. I bet every single person in the room is, that you love this level of convenience. Let me give you some examples. Medicine. You know, if you've ever done telemedicine, it's fantastic. How many times have you gone to the doctor and had an appointment only to sit in the waiting room for an hour because the doctor's running late, and you're sitting with 10 other people that are sick with a bunch of other diseases you really don't want? The benefit of you being able to call the doctor from your own home, do a video call, then prescribe things for you to your pharmacy, and even have your pharmacy deliver those medicines so that if you're really sick, you don't have to get out of your bed, I think is an incredible convenience, and one I really appreciate, particularly as someone who travels a lot. In Australia now, and excuse this graphic because there was another graphic we didn't have royalties for, so our designer pulled this together so it looks a little hacky, but in Australia we are delivering life jackets to people that are drowning. If you're drowning, that's pretty convenient. Agreed? You know, if you think about it, putting a person on a surfboard to go through a bunch of waves to get to you is going to probably take several minutes. Sending a drone out can happen in 20 or 30 seconds and give you a life preserver when you need it. A great sort of convergence of the digital and physical world. Amazon Go, right? The ability now to walk into a shop, into a grocery shop, scan your application on your phone as you walk in, grab anything you want, and walk out. No cashier, no lines, no going to the 10 items or less line to find someone in front of you with 20 items. Once again, all the friction removed and convenience clearly given to you. Buying online. Now, not just purchasing items online, but being able to see what those items look like in the room that you want to put them in real time. For me, a very personal experience. My daughter is now 4. I think I've mentioned her in 4 of the last 5 keynotes. She has some difficulty with speech, and she's getting speech therapy. The problem with a kid and speech therapy is we have a therapist that comes to our house 3-4 times a week at a specific time. If any of you have had a 4-year-old or have currently a 4-year-old, you know you cannot predict their mood or behavior at that time. They're going to be hungry, maybe they're tired, maybe they're just not in a good mood. And it doesn't always work out well. We have an application on her iPad now where she can do the speech therapy through the application, and it teaches her how to move her tongue and her mouth in certain ways and say different syllables and vowels. And she actually does it in her own time without us prompting. She just simply goes to the iPad and just clicks the app, and we look around and she's suddenly doing all these exercises when she wants to do it. And she's doing it more regularly and in a better mood than when the therapist is coming. Another great convenience. So what does this mean to all of us in the room here? Well, to survive in this digital world where convenience and frictionless experiences is demanded, you have to be a technology company. And technology has to be at the core of what you do. And everybody in this room that's why we're here together, is because you're at the core of delivering these experiences for the companies that you work for. And you're most likely going to be the competitive advantage that they have moving forward as you strive to deliver these experiences in a way that consumers can absorb. So what do we all have in common here? How do I sort of bring this together? Well, in the history of time, this has kind of been the marketplace where we've had products and services that we somehow distribute to customers that purchase them. I don't think that's any sort of new model. But as we look at the digital marketplace, how does this evolve? Well, we're seeing customers now that are digital. They're buying things online using their laptops or their smartphones, which is nothing new. But we're also now starting to see that customers can become machines or applications that are absorbing data or information via API calls. So we're seeing that the definition of a customer is evolving beyond simply just a physical person. If we go on the product side of the equation, we obviously have a huge amount of digital content that we're delivering as products and services, things like videos, music, data, applications. But also we're starting now to see that physical products are being delivered online using tools like 3D printing. So that if you purchase something, you can now print that product in your own home within 30 minutes to an hour. So we're really trying to get the time lag between purchasing something and having it delivered to the lowest possible time. If this is where we're going with physical delivery of product, you know, when Jeff Bezos isn't trying to fly into space, I've got to believe he's looking at how we can teleport physical products at some point. And at that point, we'll probably include the fast teleport protocol in the next feature of NGINX. But let's go into the main part of the equation here, which is the digital supply chain. How do we actually deliver these products over digital means to our customers? And this is really where we're moving from a completely physical to a digital experience, where we're moving from trucks and warehouses to a delivery over HTTP and API calls. And really, the focus here is how do you optimize for the things within this digital supply chain that you can control? How do you deliver a true end-to-end experience that ensures the customer is getting the experience that you want for that customer? And we have customers that are doing some really innovative work in this area. Recently, Charter Communications acquired Time Warner, and with that got an amazing catalog of content. Now they're working to deliver that content through IP delivery. And Jamie Panagos from Charter has been doing work to make sure they own that end-to-end experience. I'd like to ask Jamie Panagos to come on stage and share with us a little bit more detail of what they're doing there at Charter. Please join me in welcoming Jamie. Hey, mate.
Thank you, Gus. So Gus mentioned a few things there. A lot of it comes down to content. He mentioned video, he mentioned images, all these sorts of things that you need to download. And the way you deliver that content is important, and an understanding of that content is important. And in the wild, wild west days of content delivery, the early teens, we didn't know what we were doing. And so we were willing to hand off a lot of the control of that delivery to CDNs as a service, commercial CDNs, off-the-shelf CDNs, and we were willing to trade that because we didn't understand the content well enough. We didn't understand the delivery mechanisms enough to do that ourselves. So the control of that content is what's critical, but we were willing to make that trade earlier. And what we found is some of the inefficiencies, some of the lack of optimizations weren't exposed because we just weren't pushing the volume to matter. We weren't hitting that theoretical limit. As we approached that limit and sometimes exceeded that limit, it became painfully obvious that we did need to start to think about this. Think about the different types of content. Think about the profiles that we need to serve. Think about how we serve it, where we serve it, when we serve it, how we cache it, if we cache it. All of those sorts of things became more and more important as we started pushing the envelope on throughput and capacity and caching. At that point, we realized at Charter, and Time Warner Cable before that we needed to take a step back and evaluate if buying this as a service, buying this as an off-the-shelf CDN was A, economically viable, and B, to give us the level of control to serve those different types of contents effectively. And what we came up with at that point was, no, we need to do this ourselves. So we decided to take control of our environment. We decided to take control of how we cache, how we serve, and not only that, we decided to take control of what that stack looks like. What is the model for this? And we decided to take an interchangeable approach to it. All the parts of our CDN are interchangeable. We can pull out the OS, we can pull out the routing daemon, we can pull out, in fact, the caching daemon if we want to, but we do love NGINX. We decided to make that a very interchangeable stack to give us the control because we need to tune. We need to tune for the different types of things we're serving. We're serving video on demand, video on demand over here. We're serving linear content over here. We're serving files over here, static files over here. We need to take control of that because those have different serving profiles. That comes down to TCP tuning, NIC tuning, OS tuning, file system tuning. All of these sorts of things have different profiles that need to be applied. And the ability to do that dynamically with anything that you haven't built yourself is almost impossible. So it became very important for us to control that stack. After we did a lot of work on this, we found that the intelligence is going to be what matters. So it's understanding dynamically where I cache, understanding dynamically how long I cache, understanding dynamically which devices are allowed to do that serving. And that became kind of our mission statement was build this thing interchangeably, build this thing dynamically, and build this thing intelligently. And that's where we started to see the benefits of that work. At this point, we're passing about 1.5 terabits per second. We're at peak, we can see nodes hitting 30, 40, 50 gigabits per second. Our cost profiles have gone through the floor, and that's the real benefit of doing this. So where we're going in the future, we think getting better at those things is going to become critically important. Right now, we're pretty good at it. We think we understand our different usage profiles. We think we understand how the network reacts to things, but we still need to get better at that as the volumes increase. We're at 1.5 terabits per second now. We're looking at tens of terabits, hundreds of terabits per second, maybe petabits per second. And that's when we're going to have to get really good at this. The other part of this is CDNs tend to be overlays. So the CDN itself doesn't understand the network doesn't understand the CDN. And we feel like that's going to be a problem going forward as well. We don't understand how the CDN reacts, or how the network reacts. The network doesn't understand how we react. And sometimes you can get into this oscillation cycle, the ringing bell. And we see that as a problem going forward. The network is a finite resource, and we need to understand that. So one of the things that we're looking at is getting further and further integrated into the network, and we call that resource routing. And what that basically is the idea that if we start interacting with the network directly and start treating content and resources like we do network things, routers, switches, hosts, then as those two things start to converge, we can have a much safer environment where we aren't as likely to cripple the network isn't as likely to cripple us, and that you have this whole self-leveling system. It also gives us the opportunity to start thinking about how we do this across different networks and across different CDNs. How do we share content? How do we share resources? And how do we do this dynamically? You can't go in and configure a CDN to say, this content is over here every time it changes or anytime there's something new. This needs to be a dynamic world. So far, NGINX has been critical in our support of that. Like I said, we like this plug-and-play attitude of I can take out this, I can take out that, and NGINX has allowed us to continue that mechanism with all the flexibility and agility that we need to do this. The footprint of NGINX, the flexibility of NGINX is what has allowed us to do this. And a lot of it comes down to getting into the weeds of how NGINX actually forwards and how NGINX makes its decisions and all those sorts of things. And the ability to get into those weeds is really what allows us to do what we've done so far and where we think we need to go. That doesn't mean someone else couldn't do it, but we've had very good experience with NGINX so far. So I talk a lot more about this at my 325, so I get a lot more into depth about how some of this stuff works. But I think that's a pretty good summary of where we are right now. So I'll welcome Gus back up.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it. Good job, mate. Got a quick question for you, though.
Sure.
You have to get on the mark.
Oh, that's right. The one thing I was supposed to do.
No worries, mate. So quick question for you. What were some of the reasons in the early stages of why you were looking to build your own CDN in the first place?
Sure. So there were 4 major reasons for us, cost being a huge one, performance, agility, and flexibility. And those 2 really come down to the control aspect. The cost one was pretty simple. It was very expensive to run any other sort of CDN. Performance, we figured we could get more performance if we tailored the CDN to whatever the delivery profile was. And then the last 2, agility and flexibility, gave us the control to add features, fix bugs, pull something out because it didn't quite work the right way with this particular type of delivery. So that control and flexibility, not having to wait 6 months for a vendor to release the feature we wanted, whatever those sorts of things. Those were the things that were critical to us to get to where we needed to be.
Awesome, mate. Well, look, really appreciate you coming on stage and sharing your story. Thanks so much. So that's a great example of a customer really going to owning the experience all the way from streaming the video all the way to owning the CDN and the last mile delivery. So you optimize what you can control within your environment, but then how do you also then mitigate the things that you can't control? There's so many unknowns that everyone in this room has to face on a regular basis, whether it be new countries that are being embargoed, regulations from government or within your industry, the ever-presence of digital evil, whether that be a DDoS attack, a malicious attack, infrastructure failure, which does happen, right? Whether that's in your own data center or on a cloud, infrastructure failure happens. And so you don't have to just optimize the things within your control, but you need to build agility into your infrastructure so you can handle the things that you don't control, the unknowns. And so this is just sort of looking at the digital marketplace. And then if you extend beyond the things that are in this marketplace and you look at all the relevant players, well, there's obviously the businesses that are selling products and services. There's the consumers that are buying those services. And there's government. So let's just have a little look at what's happened in the last 12 months in that space. Right? If we look at business and what's happened there, large companies have been acquiring digital, either content or delivery, throughout their organizations to bolster up and strengthen their position in the market. Right? In every single example here, the company that was acquiring assets was either acquiring more content to sell to their customers or more delivery to be able to deliver that content to their customers. And if you look at what that was in aggregate, it was the largest year in history already, at $2.5 trillion of mergers in the first half of 2018. So obviously the existing companies are trying to strengthen their position in the market as we move in this digital world. And there's more entrance of new companies trying to disrupt the existing companies than we've ever seen before. Last year was the largest year on record of venture capital funding of $1.48 billion going into new companies to try and disrupt in this new digital marketplace. And the first 6 months of this year already is the largest 6-month period in history. And if you take this 6-month period and look at the last 10 years, it's already more than 6 of the last 10 years as a whole. So there's so much money going into new companies trying to disrupt the existing marketplace. If you look at what consumers want in this market, they want protection, right? If you look at things like just recently, I think in the last 2 weeks, we've heard that Facebook had 50 million accounts hacked. Consumers and customers are concerned about the fact that their data is being stolen. They're concerned about their identity being stolen. They're concerned about their data being sold to other people so that they get spammed. So consumers are wanting protection, and they're wanting trust with the customers that they work with the suppliers and vendors that they work with. Security is more important than ever in building that trust. And then, of course, we can't let the government stay out of the conversation. Of course, governments want to get involved and regulate. If we look at government, we've looked at the SEC now getting involved in cryptocurrency. People are asking, are cryptocurrencies securities or not? And so they're asking the SEC to get involved and regulate. I think we're all probably aware of what's happened in net neutrality and the fact that that was repealed in the last 12 months. There's a blog post that I've written on our website if you want to go read more about that, but I'm very concerned about the impact of repealing net neutrality will have on innovation as we create sort of fast lanes for certain providers, and then by default you're going to have slow lanes for everybody else, so what's the impact of that on innovation? And so we're seeing that governments are more and more actively getting involved and looking at things like fake news and how that creates sentiment within a country around products and services and even politics. So what does all this mean for us as we look at this world in the digital marketplace? Well, no longer just being a participant in the digital world is enough. If you truly want to survive, if you truly want to thrive, you need to aim to be the best. You need to be able to provide a level of convenience and an experience that is better than your competition. Otherwise, you will not survive. And once again, I think that's why everyone in the room is here. You are trying to build the best and most convenient experiences for your consumers of your products and services through using tools like NGINX. So how do you be the best? Well, you be better than your competition. Great content is a huge part of that, how you have great products and content. And we're now seeing through digital means that there's a long tail of content that vendors are able to provide, given the fact that there's a lower cost of storing and warehousing digital content. But it's also about delivering amazing experiences. Let me tell you about a real-world example for myself. My family and I, once again, a couple of weeks ago, took this new train in Florida from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. It's called the Bright Line. They've invested about $1.6 billion in this new train. Eventually, its plan is to go to Orlando, so you'll be able to do the fast train all the way to Orlando. I got to tell you, the train was stunning. Beautiful train. The terminals were new, clean, incredibly well organized. We paid, I think, an extra $5 to go into the first-class cabin to see what that was like. They had a champagne trolley in the first-class cabin for $30 a person, which I was shocked at, and a little snack and things like this. So when we got to Fort Lauderdale, we just went one way because we weren't quite sure when we'd be coming back, and we bought our tickets at the desk. But when we were at the restaurant, I thought, okay, it took quite a while to get the tickets. Let me download the app and log into the app and buy the tickets online. I had to input everybody's name, and there were 4 of us in the group going. I had to put everybody's birth date into the app, and then I had to put my credit card details and everything else. It took about 5 minutes or so to do all this. And then when I actually hit pay, the app crashed. And it was incredibly frustrating for me because, I'd spent 5 minutes trying to input all this data. But think about it. $1.6 trillion of investment into this train and terminals and everything else. And how much they spent on that app, maybe 20 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand. But that experience ruined the whole experience. You cannot deliver a digital experience that's poor. It trickles down into the value of everything else your company does. That's the face of your company. You can't deliver those poor experiences. You need to be cheaper. And by cheaper, I don't mean the lowest cost. But you need to be able to deliver your products and services at the lowest cost possible if you want to be competitive. We all know about scaling up when you have high demand. But equally important if you want to deliver your products and services at the lowest cost possible is scaling down when you don't. So you save the money when you don't need to be spending it on infrastructure. So you need to be able to be smart in the way that you build and deliver your infrastructure so that you can deliver your products at the lowest possible cost. And finally, you've got to be faster. I think the video at the opening was really important and pertinent about the fact that you can lose a customer in 3 seconds. And that's for sure. I think everybody in this room has experienced using a driving application, and if that one doesn't work, you go to the other driving application, right, if you have a poor experience. And in that video, we talk about the fact that 3 seconds really matters. For many people in the room, it's not about seconds. It's about milliseconds. And speed is really, really important. And no one knows this more than AppNexus. AppNexus was recently acquired by AT&T. They're a digital advertising marketplace. And when they don't deliver their advertising in seconds, they lose their opportunity. I want to ask you to help welcome Josh Ryder from AppNexus to the stage to tell us about how performance is so critical to their environment. Josh? Thanks, mate.
Hi, all. You heard Gus talk about better, cheaper, and faster, and we know that the joke is, of course, choose two. With NGINX Plus, we've not had to make that compromise. AppNexus is a premier digital marketplace for advertising, with 90% of the ComScore 200 digital publishers and all the top 100 Ad Age brands leveraging the AppNexus platform. The AppNexus marketplace is the leading digital destination for quality, cost-efficient, transparent, and brand-safe digital advertising, with over 34,000 publishers and 177,000 brands transacting in our marketplace. As you'll hear in Ernesto's talk later today, AppNexus was able to replace all of our traditional hardware load balancers with NGINX, and furthermore, expand our deployment to sit in front of our real-time platform. Now, how real-time? From the time a customer clicks a link to the time an auction is held and the creative is selected averages around 100 milliseconds. And we're handling millions of transactions per second, 24/7, 365 for our customers all across the globe. And NGINX is really a key component ensuring the availability and performance of our platform. So when elliptic curve became a thing a few years ago, and we were faced with the reality that there were really no hardware load balancers out there at the time that were optimized for accelerating that traffic, we had to look for alternatives. And part of that process was we went to our partners. We went to the partners that we had, we looked for new partners, and we started to really think through what were our options in the market. One of our good and trusted partners at the time proposed a solution that would have had us deploying multiple layers of conventional load balancing hardware and at a cost of millions and millions of dollars to us. And that was really just to solve the problem that we had right now. Not talking about any of the additional load, not talking about expanding our footprint to our real-time platform, millions and millions of dollars just to solve the problem we had. We figured we could do better, and the amazing team that we have at AppNexus, along with NGINX, we were able to solve that. So we improved our scalability, our flexibility in deployments, all while saving millions of dollars compared to our traditional hardware load balancers with NGINX. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. So you saved millions and millions of dollars by going from physical hardware to NGINX. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got some of those savings?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really competitive advantages for us is we can scale linearly as we need to using commodity hardware. So what one of the things that NGINX allowed us to do was take our bog standard servers and commission them into a load balancing at a cost sometimes 10x less than what we'd be looking at for the equivalent in hardware load balancers.
That's amazing. And are you now 100% proprietary hardware free?
We are.
Congratulations. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Excuse me. So people are demanding digital experiences. People demand a certain level of convenience. And the reality is that we're wired that way now. The synapses in our brain is telling us that this is the expectation we should expect. And anything less, we're going to go somewhere else. So we have to be able to deliver those amazing experiences. So how do you master that in a digital world? You focus on the things you can control. You optimize those things that you can. You deliver amazing performance, reliability, scale, and security, the 4 sort of key tenets of building out your infrastructure. And then, of course, you've got to prepare for the things that you can't control. How do you mitigate the risk of the things that are going to come at you? As I said, whether it be DDoS attacks or changes in policy or regulation, you need to be able to handle those unknowns. And you need to build an infrastructure that's agile enough to be able to adapt, that's not locked into an underlying infrastructure so that you can move from one infrastructure to another if that's what's needed. And so what we're doing at NGINX is trying to deliver more certainty in this somewhat uncertain world. If you look at the solutions that both Jamie and Josh talked about, it's the same software. The same 200,000 odd lines of code allowed Jamie to go build a CDN to stream his video content to his customers, and then allowed Josh to move off physical proprietary hardware to using NGINX to do load balancing. Our software is incredibly adaptable across many different use cases. We can be deployed using typical CI/CD tools like Jenkins. We can be automated with tools like Ansible. We can be integrated with a variety of security solutions like Signal Sciences and Wallarm, who are here in our partner booths. We run on almost any infrastructure, whether it's bare metal, virtual machines, containers, cloud. We try and provide software and a platform that helps give you the agility so that you can, for your company, deliver certainty in these uncertain times. I wanted to thank you all so much for coming to Conf this year. As I said, it's a great couple of days of content. I think you're going to have a great time. And I wanted to not talk too much about product and leave that to my next presenter, our VP of Product, Sydney Rabsat. Please join me in welcoming Sydney to the stage.